Emma was an average high school student, like many of you. She had big dreams but often found herself stuck in a cycle of procrastination. Her days were spent staring at textbooks that felt like mountains she couldn't climb, all while the world outside seemed so much more interesting. Her phone was always buzzing, friends sending messages, notifications popping up, each one pulling her away from the work she knew she had to do. At first, she tried to convince herself that she could power through. "I just need to push through this assignment," she thought. But every time she opened a book, her mind wandered. She'd glance at her phone, then scroll through social media for what she told herself would be just a minute. That minute stretched into an hour, and then she'd feel even more behind. Emma didn't have a plan. She'd sit down to study but quickly felt overwhelmed by everything she needed to get done. It wasn't just the amount of work, it was the constant pressure to be perfect, to get everything right the first time. She'd hear people talk about their study routines and feel like she was the only one who couldn't get it together. Her grades were slipping, and the more she stressed about it, the harder it became to focus. One evening, as Emma sat in her room staring at a pile of homework, she realized something. She had been trying to tackle everything all at once, hoping that magically, everything would get done. But it wasn't working. In that moment, Emma decided she needed a new approach, a simpler one. She knew that if she didn't change something, her stress and anxiety would only get worse. She needed a plan that wasn't about perfection, but about progress. She decided to start small. She had read about this technique called the Pomodoro technique, which was basically about breaking study time into focused chunks. At first, it sounded silly. 10 minutes of work didn't seem like enough to make any real progress, but Emma figured, why not give it a try? So she picked up her phone, set the timer for just 10 minutes, and promised herself she would focus only on studying during that time. No distractions. No phone. Just the task at hand. To her surprise, those 10 minutes flew by faster than she expected. Instead of looking at the clock every few minutes, Emma was so focused that the timer went off before she realized it. She took a quick 5-minute break and went back for another round of 10 minutes. The more she practiced this, the easier it became to sit down and focus. The act of setting small, manageable goals helped Emma feel less overwhelmed, and as each 10-minute block passed, she began to feel a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't always easy. There were days when distractions seemed louder than ever, and she had to remind herself over and over to stick to her timer. But with every little success, Emma felt more confident. She began to see that focus wasn't something magical, it was a skill, one she could build, just like any other. The more she practiced, the stronger her focus became. As the weeks went by, Emma started noticing some real changes. Her grades began to improve, and her stress levels dropped. What once felt like an endless mountain of work now felt like a series of manageable steps. She no longer felt like she was constantly chasing the clock or wasting time. When she sat down to study, she could focus more deeply, knowing that after a short burst of work, she'd get a break. By the time the next exam rolled around, Emma wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. She had learned to control her focus, and with that control came a sense of peace. Her grades were better than she expected, but more importantly, she no longer felt overwhelmed. Emma realized that focus wasn't something you had to be born with. It wasn't an impossible skill to master. It was something you could train, bit by bit, day by day. One evening, after a long day of studying, Emma sat back and reflected on how far she had come. She thought back to when she used to feel lost, like there was no way out of the cycle of procrastination. And now, she had control over her time, her focus, and her life. She smiled, realizing that it wasn't about doing everything perfectly. It was about showing up, one small step at a time. And that's what had made all the difference. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more study tips every week.